Live chat experience for you and viewers who can participate. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, close. Just doing a test live stream because I haven't done one in a while. So just gonna see. I'm just gonna ramble until I know it was unannounced, but it's all good. It's all gravy. Yeah. Cool. Your live stream is up to date. New tab. Always like to have this screen up. And I'm just gonna see. Let me pull that back up. I bet nobody. I'm just gonna see how long I'm gonna stay on here. I'm gonna do a countdown to see how long I'm gonna stay on here before anyone sees it. Yep. No. We're gonna see how long I can stay on here before anyone sees it. Before anyone sees it. Check 1, 2. Microphone tester. Test 1, 2. We'll see. I don't get no one in the next 6, 7 minutes. I'll shut it down. Because this will let me know if YouTube is notifying anyone that subscribed. I'm live right now. And this was random. And this was just to see if people are watching, they get the notification, and if they want to ask me some questions. Because I used to do this before. And I stopped. I don't get to do this very often because some days I'm working on Fridays. So some days I'm working on Saturdays. Some days I'm working on Sundays. So on days off, I'm going to try to do a live chat. So it has now been 3 minutes. I haven't seen anyone popped up. So like I said, I'll wait. I'm going to time it. And if no one chimes in within the next okay, all right. Thanks for joining in. Since I'm lurking, I really don't have any questions though. Left a like for support. Appreciate it. Thanks. I appreciate that. I'm trying to build the momentum back. I've been working quite a bit. And I know that, so it's kind of hard for people that whenever I post these videos, because I'll plan to do certain things and some things don't work out, then I have to revamp. So other than that, but I really appreciate you supporting the channel and giving me a like. I really help that. I really appreciate that. So just waiting if anyone have any questions on anything musically. Maybe talk about compressors, maybe equalizers. Do you have any questions on mixing consoles, preamps, microphones, speakers, anything? So just like I said, I'm just waiting. I do have a few people in here that I do get post some comments. I do get a few questions from a couple of people that actually ran studios that support the channel. We'll talk from time to time on that as well. So But like I said, I need to post when I'm going to do these live streams so more and more people will know when I'm going to do a video or when I'm going to live chat, because I think sometimes people want to live chat so they can ask me a question right then and there that they can ask, especially when it comes to this console right here or mixed consoles in general, because I'll get questions every now and then. I'll get a question and someone will say, well, I have an Allen Heath or whatever the case may be, and whatever the case, and they'll ask a question something like, how do I get the faders to work in the DAW or whatever? And I said, you got to remember, consoles like these are completely analog, so they can't connect to a DAW. There's no USB connection, no Thunderbolt connection or anything like that. You have to take the outputs and the inputs of your interface and just run it through the console. And you're using the electronics of the console, the signal flow of the console. That's all you're doing. You're just passing signal through it. But you're still going to do everything in the DAW, or if you want to use the console along with a patch bay to use outboard gear. So, let me see what no problem. You know what's they popped in my head. Are there any similar qualities? Some smaller quality sounding consoles that isn't that infamous SSL Big 6, but that's too overpriced. That's too overpriced or not that overpriced. Believe it or not, I use an example when it comes to consoles that you don't have to pay like I made a big rant video on this on the SSL 6. The problem, and I'll talk about the SL6 for just a second. The problem that I have with the SF6 is that you're paying $3,000 or whatever the case for it because it's an SSL. But it wouldn't be so much of a problem if they gave you more EQ control. The biggest thing you're doing is, if you notice this, and even in any plugin, you at least have high, mid-low, and low. And even those on plugins, they're sweepable and you can control the bandwidth. You can make it a narrow width or even a wide band width to really shape the signal, because EQs are really designed to decrease or increase wanted or unwanted frequencies. That's why the whole term equalizer. The problem with the Big 6 is they give you 6 basic fixed control EQ bands. You're going to pay $3,000 for something that's 6 whatever case. As an example, I'll take this Allen Heath. It's 48 channels, which means it's 48 channels. It's a 4-band. It's got a high, mid-low, and low. Plus, each channel is a preamp per channel. And for example, for me versus, and everyone knows Allen Heath is a very respected name in the business. I got a great deal. Got this analog console from a church, and I only paid $400 for it. But the thing is, the analog sound that you're getting with this. And they'll use other justifications like, well, at least the 6 give you DAW control. Well, I have DAW control, and that fader port, and that's an older one, $69, $79 to control your pay. If you don't want to use your keyboard commands and mouse, buy a DAW controller. But yeah, you can I've said this time and time again, with even my Behringer MX 8000 I have downstairs. That console also has at least 24 preamps in it. It also has a 4-band EQ, as well as, and so forth, as well as the auxiliary and buses and all that. Plus, you can route signal through it. Plus, it's just more ideal to route a lot more signal to get a lot more outboard gear in and out of your workflow. And I think I paid $150 for that. $150 for that console. The only reason why for $150 because it didn't have a power supply, so I had to find a power supply. And I found that for $125. So altogether, $275 for everything, and it's been working ever since. And that console was designed in the mid-90s, and I still use it to this day. And I made time and time videos again. With showing how great you can get quality sound spending that kind of money. You don't have to spend SSL Big 6 money to get this great analog sound if you're working more than just your interface. So, okay, he said the Allen and Heath have the best deals used online. Is just too big for me. And you don't, and okay, I get that. And you don't even have to go with like an older, like this GL 3800 or GL 4000 or GL 5000 24. You can even use the Allen Heath Z. smaller format mixing console, and it don't even have to be Allen Heath. It could be a smaller format Behringer or Mackie or a Yamaha console, something maybe it's 12 channels or whatever. But at least those, at least you're not spending $3,000. You can probably find you a nice sounding Yamaha analog console for about $200 or $300, and you will find out that and I'll say this what engineers have known for decades. What gives analog its sound is the electronic circuits. I did a video where I modified one of my microphones by upgrading the capacitors and things like that. Let's break it down to just microphones. If you've looked at a Telefunken or a Neumann microphone, if you look at it, it looks like any other. As far as the looks and the way it appears, it looks no different than a Warm Audio, or maybe it could be, I don't know, Geoprot, or any other company that makes microphones, whether they're Telefunken, Neumanns, or clone companies. The body, what's separating that microphone from a $200 cheap microphone is the electronics. Pretty much, that's it. So, and Warm Audio and Stem Audio and all these clone companies figure that out. That's why they sell clone companies with transformers and so forth. And that's why you're getting this high-end sound, even with clone companies, because they know it's the transformers, it's the capacitors, it's the capsule. Once you change that, like you go to microphoneparts.com and you can buy a $200 microphone, go to microphoneparts.com, buy the upgrades for a couple $100, and now you got $1,000 sounding microphone without spending $1,000 on a microphone, because that's the only difference between $1,000 microphone is the electronics. So you get the electronics internally, you're gonna get the exact same sound to a point. Everything else depends on your placement, your acoustics of your room. But for in general, the microphone itself was going to sound the same way. So let me go to the next question. So, well, yeah, I got it for $400, and that's only. The church decided the only reason why they got rid of this console is because they wanted to use a digital smaller console. That's it. So this console was in pristine condition. The difference is I paid $400, but I didn't have to pay any freight because I went down and picked this up. I live in Tennessee. I had to go to Mississippi, 5-hour drive away, but a couple $100 in gas, I don't think I didn't spend that, maybe $80 in gas and a 5-hour drive, and I had it. Loaded in the back of an Expedition, drove it back, carried it upstairs in this room up here, $400, and I've been using it ever since. And let me tell you, the sound is amazing. I'm getting this big studio sound with it. Yeah, just like any other analog console that you would see in large community commercial studios. It's because it's the electronics. Let me ask the next question. Thanks, man. Thanks, man, for joining in. Yeah, I decided to go live. I know I didn't announce it, but I just said, let me go live, because a lot of people said that I wasn't, more people requested I do this more. I've been working, so I don't get a chance to do these live streams very often. But I just want to throw that in there that, to do this. And I think it's Vigilante. Vigilante was asking about the Allen Heath and how the great deal and so forth and so forth. Also, it says, he's just reiterating what it's saying. He said, it's also the circuit itself. Trying to get the sound with a different circuit is futile. And like I said, it's like anything else. Sometimes you'll get engineers. Let's say they'll run the signal through a piece of gear. It could be a bass, it could be a vocals, it could be keys, guitars. But sometimes, whether you engage the signal or not, you can even bypass it. The point that is running across the transformer, the resistors, the capacitors. Capacitors is one of the key components in the signal. And if you ever thought about how an equalizer is constructed, you're dealing with op amps and capacitors and resistors. And you're dealing with the volume levels, and each capacitor has, for example, you have a certain rated capacitor And that's how you're getting high frequencies, and you're just boosting your cutting that particular frequency based on the size of that capacitor and so forth. Also, it's just a little bit more complicated now, but that's pretty much in a nutshell. So you take a high, mid-low, and low. You know, if you look at the circuit of a low circuit on a EQ, it's got a way bigger capacitor than so forth. It's like anything else. It's like if you look at piano strings, the piano strings on a piano are thin on the higher pitches because the thinner strings make higher pitches. It's no different than guitar. If you look at the E string, the high E string is a lot thinner than the low E string because the higher makes higher frequencies. Or if you ever look at an instrument or anything else like that, it's the way the bends are on a it's why a trumpet is the size that it is. That's why it's way higher pitched than a tuba. The bends and all that are way bigger because the frequencies are, and so forth. Let's see what else. It says my studios are all analog, which I prefer. Analog has a larger noise floor, which I actually prefer. Too clean sounds massively out of place to me. And another thing to add on to that, one of the things about analog, really, I think I was watching, I don't know if it was Graham from the Recording Revolution or someone else was describing when people are using, this is when people are running 44.1 versus 48 versus 90, 96 versus 192 or whatever, the bit rate, which is the sampling rate, right? But it's all about how fast your computer can process, because higher bit rates require more sampling process, which requires more CPU usage, more RAM, and so forth. But if you look at it, digital is more like, it's like boxy versus analog is like this smooth wave. Digital, or or another way to describe it is like pixels, versus something that we see with our natural eyes. When we look at something, an image, like I can take this pyramid, right? The curvature of these are a lot more natural to the human eye than if you pixel. And the way that you'll see if you take a picture of this is when you zoom in and you can start seeing the pixels break down. You can start seeing it look like big shapes. Well, that's the same thing what it's trying to do. It's trying to take a bunch of shapes of samples. It's like, or another way to describe it is the reason why they do so many frames per second. If you ever watched a movie, you're looking at, versus what you're really looking at is millions to billions of actual still photos. And the best way to do this, we used to do this when I was in school. You would draw a picture, and then you would take on the next page, you would draw another picture, but you would move something, and then you would do it on the next one. Like, let's say you take the arm, and the arm's here. You draw the arm like that. The next picture, you draw like the arm like that. The next one, you draw like that arm like that. So by the time you reversed it, and you went to get the pages, the arm would look like it did like this. It would just look like that. And the faster you can scroll those pages, the faster, the smoother the action will look. That's frames per second. That's why you hear this thing, 24 frames versus video, which regular TV is 30 frames per second. You start getting to 60 frames per second. And all they're doing to get the slow-mo action down is they're taking at 60 or 120 frames per second to get this. The slow motion, and all they're doing is slowing down the frame rate at faster frame rates. They're slowing it down to get this really, like you saw in The Matrix and the other movie. That's all it is. But pictures are nothing but frames per second. Well, bit rate sampling at 44.1 or 48 is the exact same thing. You're sampling a tone. You're just sampling it over and over and over so many thousand times a second. And the more you hear, the faster your ear starts to sound more and more natural. And so analog doesn't do it. Analog is always, because analog is always the most natural sounding thing that we hear. It's like if you take a real instrument like a trumpet, tuba, guitar, a violin, and they actually play it, you're playing that versus if you play something sampled. Now, because computers can process, it doesn't matter if it's a keyboard, your computer, a VST, whatever, because the computers can process the sound so fast, you can't hear it. I'll give you one more example. We'll go back into like your typical room. One more example would be like your light. The light in your room, in your house, is turning on 60 times a second. it's turning on so fast that you can't see it flickering. But if you break out your camera and you turn on your camera, and a lot of times if you take on your camera and you kind of aim it at the light, let's say or the best way to look at a TV, you can actually start seeing the flutter in the TV through your camera, because now you can actually see that it's turning on and off because of the processing of your camera and all that. So analog is always that, and engineers have known that, and this is really the reason why they say, okay, when you have digital, you're listening to digital. They decided that digital was so almost so flat sounding. The depth image that you would hear in what they call stereo imaging, which when you listen to speaker. This is what engineers are doing when they're sitting. That's why they call it sitting in the sweet spot at a console. They're listening for the stereo image, and they're trying to see where they're going to place everything within the stereo image. And what the problem with when you had something that was completely digital is it created this flat type of, it was almost like a square, and it didn't have a reality to it. So they decided, okay, we got to come up with some way to saturate this. So they come up with saturation plugins. They come up with tape saturation plugins and everything to get, because tape, you got to think about going back in the day when everything was recorded to tape. When they used to record the tape, the way sound, the magnetics of the tape that would put stuff on tape would create this natural saturation. And another way, it's hard to really describe even or outer order of harmonics, these harmonics. But what you're doing is you're creating this depth. This it's almost like the picture went from digital. It's almost like it went from here to here. And it's almost, and it's so psychologically subconscious that you don't observe. It's no different than if you're driving and all of a sudden you hear, like, for example, a police or ambulance siren, and it's you can kind of get this perception as to your right, maybe to the back or in the front. And then when it's coming from one of those positions, then you realize, oh, it's coming, but your perception from where it's at is, or whatever case, is kind of like it goes from your ear, and then there's another thing as it gets into physics and science on why it sounds like the signal sounded the way it does as it passed you. But it's designed to, it's like, so when you listen to analog, it's got this, it's hard to really describe. It's like reason why I did a video a long time. I wish I hadn't did it, took it away. When it comes to tape and listening to stuff on cassette compared to listening to stuff on CD. But cassette is really a super, super small version of the reel-to-reels that used to be in studio. And I'm going to tell you, the only reason why most recording studios were pretty much forced to kind of go Pro Tools route or the DAW route is simply because of the editing. You don't have a whole lot of editing capability with tape. A lot of guys used to take the razor blade, and they would have to cut and splice the tape around to edit the tape, but you really didn't have nowhere near what you could do, as far as the cut, copy, paste, slide, save, undo. You can't undo an uncut. Once you cut the tape, it's cut. Let's say you splice something in your DAW, you can undo that and go back before as if you never cut that. Man said tape has a saturation. It shaves off peaks of transients, which automatically makes audio sound smoother. Its ability to smooth and also allows things to seem close or far away. And one good way example of that with the tape, because if you go back and listen to any classic top number one hit from the 80s, I'm gonna have, we'll go Holiday with Madonna, or we'll go Thriller with Michael Jackson, or we'll go any of those 80s artists, Barbra Streisand or any so forth. There was no DAWs. It was Studer or Sony or Atari 2-inch tape machines. It was a MCI or an Harrison or an SSL or a Neve console. It was 1176s and LA2As and DBX 160s, and that was your plugins, was actual physical outboard gear. If you go back and listen to the nuances of all that, and for people that may not know what transits are, let's say you hit the drum, the snare drum. Not only you're listening to the tack of the drum, all the hardware that's all the hardware that's got the drum put together, including the wood of the drum, the skins of the wood, how it's tuned, all is going to resonate as sound. Well, the transits are everything that makes that snare drum sound the way it sounds when the drummer hits it. All the little nuances to that are transients, and not just the actual tack of the hitting the snare on the drum, but the little resonance and all that little extra, that's transients. So it's kind of like sometimes there are wanted transits and sometimes there's unwanted transits, and then there's a difference between wanting the transit versus trying to eliminate bleed over. This is why with bleed over, you would have the gates. Sometimes you would use expanders and so forth to eliminate bleed over, especially when you're trying to mic drum, because if you don't mic the drums and use gates, you can get a lot of bleed over from the top snare, the bottom snare, mic placement between the kick, the overheads. You're going to get bleed over. So you're trying to get the snare drum, but yet still get the sound natural. So mic placement is crucial, but you're also trying to still capture some of the transients with the drums. So let's see. Vigilante said the saturating plugins don't sound the same at all to me. Not saying they don't need to sound good, just not the, and they're not. There was always this argument between analog gear and plugins, and I had to dump, because I use plugins too, but I had to dump that one sound better than the other. I had to instead of saying one sounds better than the other, I had to get to the point that one sounds different. And the only difference between, whether you're going to use plugins or real gear is, do you like the sound of the plugin or do you like the sound of the real gear? Some people are perfectly fine. And then, of course, your consumers, the people that listen to music, can't tell the difference. They don't have a trained ear to that. Yeah, some people can psychologically hear. For example, if you go back in other than volume levels, because mastering helped push volume levels. Back in the day, music could be softer, but because people didn't have the type of stereo system they have today in the 80s, they didn't have the speakers didn't have the ability to do low. They have the ability to do the low end like you can today. The subs are way more present in music today than it was then. Low end, especially in hip hop and everything else. Low end frequencies were, the biggest low end frequency that you had in anything music back in the day was the kick drum or the bass guitar. That was your lowest frequency. But now that you had all these synthesized and subsonic sounds from synthesizers and things like that, and 808s and 909 drum machines and so forth, the low ends got, so that changed that. But so as you look over time, music have changed also. Music always going to change with technology, period. Technology is always going to, music's going to change. But as far as plugins, it's more about, I've gotten away from the argument one sounds better, but I got into more one sounds different than the other. It's kind of like you can take you get as many SSL plugins, channel strip plugins as you want. Is it going to ever even sound like an actual real analog? Because you got to remember, when you're running it through your computer, part of the sound is the transformers. Part of the sound is the op amps. Part of the sound is the resistors and capacitors that is the circuit the signal's passing through. That those circuits pass on. This is why they have the biggest argument, because those consoles are modular. Channel 7 may sound a little different than channel 8, because channel 7 might have gotten used more, might have worn out the. This is why they do when they call recapping, meaning they'll pull the channel out. They'll get all the capacitors, because capacitors over time, especially electrical capacitors, they start to leak and they start to lose their tonal quality from the leakage because of the heat. So they'll pull it out, recap it, and it brings that channel back to life. For the most part, the capacitors are the weakest link in most electronics, is the capacitors. So if you have an electronic that's failing, the number one culprit is the capacitors. Resistors or anything, unless you just overloaded the circuit and blew the circuit. Another thing that can fail can be the op amps. But other than that, that's your biggest failure. So low end frequencies, and let me go back to, they didn't have a lot of that back in the day. I think he said Man Network said back in the day, too much bass caused the needle to bounce out of the grooves of the record. Yeah, when you actually play records, people that play vinyls, and it's funny we do with people because they, you see someone that play a vinyl, they see 16, 33, 45, or 78, and they'll have a 33, but they have the speed on 45, and then of course the record goes faster because that's the RPMs. That was the speed of the motor. So you had to set it at that certain RPM. Like 33s are usually, your albums are played at 33 RPMs versus your singles are played at 45. Your short singles played at 78. Yeah, it could do that, especially if but most of the time, because the low end from the speakers was booming the room, because you still was creating these bass reflections in front of your speakers, and that still is vibrating in the room and so forth. But anyhow, I was trying to get back to the plug-in versus the analog. Now, there are pros and cons to both. One great pro about a plug-in is if you have 32 tracks, you can buy one plug-in and put it on all 32 tracks. You can't do that with a piece of gear. If I buy a piece of gear, either it's going on one of these channels, or it's going on the bus, or it's going on the main bus. That's it. I have to use more than one piece of gear. This is the reason why you would see some of these big studios with 25 compressors. They would have 65, whatever EQs or whatever they have, all these tons and tons of rack. But another thing I think Man Network said it earlier too, was about the noise. Because once you start running, you start getting this, you're going to get some noise, but you have to really contain it. They would use hissers, the de-essers, and everything to try to control the noise. But believe it or not, one thing I learned, one of the problems with noise would be grounding issues. And if you have a large system and don't have a significant star ground system to eliminate, or you can get, and it don't always have to be those buzzy ground noise. Sometimes you can get low end hum just from all that gear, the ground looping to each other. So you want to isolate ground, especially with a lot of outboard analog gear. The biggest issue that you got to worry about is, especially when you're recording vocals or an acoustic instrument like an acoustic guitar, or you're going to mic a guitar cabinet or whatever. And on top of that, you got to be careful of the guitar cabinet. It's not creating noise itself. You want to make sure that it's not creating all these unnecessary buzzes and sounds, especially, because if that guitar player don't have his stuff sound up right, for a lot of times you can hit the strings and then left the strings, you start hearing this ground buzz. You touch the string, it goes away because the guitar isn't set up right. So a lot of times you went, the guitar, and one thing I learned this from me as a musician myself, because I play guitar and bass, is make sure your luthier is getting your instrument set up properly, and that's going to makes a difference, the way you play and the way it sounds, because if the guitar, because it's still got to go through the amp. And if the amp is noisy or the guitar is noisy, you're going to get noise. And that noise is going to travel through the console, it's going to travel through the outboard gear, and it's going to get on to your recording source. Now, in all this day, we're all recording to DAWs. So it's going to get to the DAW. Which also brings me to another thing that I have to do one day. I have to do a live feed. I have to do a live feed, or I have to do a video on the recording process. I've done this before on videos I've done before on how I record, but I really want to do an in-depth video on how I record and how do you make it sound big. Oh, for those that are joining the channel, I really do. And once again, thanks for the thumbs up. It helps. Thanks for those who are tuning in. For tuning in and watching the video, it helps. It all helps the channel. I know a lot of people think I disappear. I've been working a lot. I had to work because I'm really trying to get the studio ready for next year, because I'm going to actually start doing more and more clients, and I want to make sure I have everything ready to go. Also, for those that know, eventually, I'm probably going to eventually end up moving. I'm thinking about moving back to Texas, but I want to make sure I get in a house that's going to be more equipped, so I can kind of have my home studio where I can get clients to come in and they don't have to go through your house. They can actually go through a separate entrance. So I'm going to look for a house that has a separate entrance where I can do that. That's my goal. Plus, I want to get a house. I want to be on one floor instead of, this is upstairs, and it's going to be kind of nerve-wracking to walk up and down stairs. So that's my goal. So I went back to work. Even though I'm retired from the Army, I went back to work to, because when you're working, that's extra supplemental income. It's going to help me buy, more microphones, more cables, more acoustic paneling, and so, just get everything I need. So when I get another house that I'm going to set up my studio, I'll be ready to go, which is going to be my next topic, because so many people have created their own home studios, but there's still, believe it or not, there's still thousands of people. There's still thousands of people that still want to go to recording studios, and if you have a home recording studio well equipped to record people, they'll probably most likely, especially independent artists, getting name brand like bringing Mariah Carey or Mary J. Blige or some well-known artists is very hard to do, unless you know them personally. Other than that, they're not. Chances of getting an artist like that in your studio is like slim to none. Let me see. So man asks, what kind of equipment are you needing to be up and running? Well, what I want to do, I have patch bays. I have I have over here, I have the Nutrix or Notrix, or how you want to pronounce it. And I also have some Behringer. But what I want to do is I want to get a high quality. I want to get a Switchcraft. I want to get a high quality. I'm running a lot of because this console doesn't use the DB25 connection. It uses XLR and it uses XLR, and it also runs 1/4 inch, TSR cables. But my goal, believe it or not, my goal is to actually find something like an AMEC or Neotech or something that I'm going to run more DB25. And I also want to have, what I want to do is I want to run more higher quality cables in and outs for all my outboard gear. Plus, I want to really come up with a set up a lavish Starground system. The next place I want to do, I'm actually going to do some construction. I want to do a room within the room, run cables on the floor. I want to actually set up like an actual studio, not have cables all over the place. And the reason I have cables all over the place because I just don't want to tear up the walls, because it's kind of hard to sell your house when your walls got holes in them, because I ran patch panels and tie lines, and so it's kind of hard to really explain it to somebody that want to buy a house that's not even into recording, into musical recording studio. So I want to redo that. I want to make it more clean, because if people come in, you see it's cables everywhere, and it's for the fact that I don't want to rip up the floors and carpet. Yeah, I could put holes in the walls. There's ran it through behind the walls, but I don't want to do that, because this room is not ideal. I know it's a long explanation, but it's not ideal for recording. This is really like a bedroom without a closet. It's a bonus room. So, yeah, I want to have the control room and live room. So That's the equipment I'm needing. I'm just needing more of I just want to make it more where it's not, and plus I'm sitting here at this desk. I got my stereo rack. I got this big, gigantic, bulky computer desk. I want all that to go away. So it looks like I've seen so many home recording studios where they're top notched because they don't have all the extra stuff. They don't have like a book stand with a TV in here, computer desk bulky over here. They don't have none of that. They just have mainly this, and I probably could could have that, but I probably could clear all this out, and it probably would help tremendously in being able to create more room and all that. But plus on the idea because of all the gear in here, it just makes it such a small room to record in because of that. But I'm sure if I rearrange the room, I could and get rid of a lot of this extra. I probably could do that. Yo, you asked me, have I ever? You said you're consider. I'm obsessed with cable management. All my track and mixing rooms have to be really tidy cabling. Yeah, I'm seriously guilty of having bad cable management because it's like it does help with the workflow and how you move around. I'm really bad at that, and I need to get so much better. But I got so many cables because, when you have real pro level, that stuff it's the way the cabling. You understand this, and so let me see. He says, "Have I ever considered GoFundMe?" I have. I would like to create a GoFundMe. I just don't know anyone that would donate. And it's I guess me if let's see, I think I got about 2,800 subscribers. And if you think about this, even if all my subscribers donated $1, right, that would be a big help. It would be a huge help. But you say, have I Cat 5 cabling revolutionized my cable problems? I wonder. I never thought about that. I know my church we're running Cat 5. I never considered how I would do that with all my gear. And the Cat 5, I'm going to have to research that and how to Cat 5 that. Especially because the only thing that will be running, most of the stuff runs through my interfaces. The Antelope interface, everything else is running TSR and XLRs to the console. So you say, so you just need a breakout box and that turns the Cat 5 into DB25s. Oh, okay. That's okay. Huh. I'm listening. So, okay. Okay. That's probably, So that means I got over 1 million cable points at all Cat 5. Wow. So I wonder how would that function with, let's say, my Lin 76s or the outboard gear. I wonder how that would, because that's still those are still using balanced cables to the patch bay. So I wonder how that would work. I'm gonna research that. So I guess I would so I wonder how that would run. I have to research that. I like that though. I'm definitely gonna research how I can incorporate that. Because that would probably definitely eliminate a lot of, that would eliminate, and that's probably one of those deals. I never even turned this light on. I guess that would have helped if I turned the light on. I guess that would help. And it's dirt cheap. Yeah, now I'm definitely. Yeah, you got my 100%. See, I don't know everything. I don't know everything There's always someone on the channel that can. There's always someone on the channel that can bring something to the table. Like, have you tried that? There are people on this table that probably can create a YouTube channel that's probably way more in depth than I am. I just gotta get, for me, I have to really, I have to learn to really, because there are people that got these amazing YouTube channels. That's probably why the channels are huge. I think most people, I think the only reason a lot of people watch my channels because they say I'm more natural. I'm not scripted. I kind of, so. Oh yeah, Vigilante said, I just bought a bunch of cables. I didn't know about going Cat 5 until now either. Yep. See, I never really thought about it because I was old school traditional. I do know that the old school would take like a switchcraft. They would, all that stuff was soldered in at the patch bay because that was patch bays were permanent, either in the rack or in a wall or next, whatever case, or next to the console. It was hardwired in that way, and then they just ran under the floor or through the walls to the gear, and but you wouldn't see it. But that stuff is hardwired in. But I never figured Cap. I just got to see how you would do that with Cap. I should have a YouTube channel, but I'm just too lazy. We have a film studio, but I use it for clients, but not myself. Let me tell you, there are a lot of people that do this amazing stuff with YouTube as far as, they do the inserts, everything. And some of them are using stuff with OBS Studio, and there's other software. I just don't have the time to learn it. I wish I had the time to learn it. I don't have the time to sit there or the patience. Sometimes I get AD, I get what they call attention deficit, whatever you call it, when you can't keep your focus for 5 minutes because your mind is going to make things and you're trying to jump to do some other stuff. So that's my problem. So Cat 5 reduces noise flawlessly. You can have super long cables runs without audio loss. Like I said, they run Cat 5. They run Cat 5 in my church because the sanctuary is huge and they can't run these long snakes. They run Cat 5, and the mixing console, they're using a PreSonus Live console for the mixer, and then of course we just plug in, from different parts within and we just plug into that, and that just sends it to the stage box. But we still run analog XLRs and quarters to the stage box, and the next stage box is connected by Cat 5. But he said the breakout boxes are on the front and back end. Then all your patch bays and all gear are pretty much the same. BBDB25. Like I said, I'm going to definitely read. I really appreciate that. I'm definitely going to see what I can do to, if I come up with a more efficient way to set up my stuff. That way, I'm going to do it. So yeah, like I said, I've been on here. It's going on an hour. You've been yapping my gums. And like I said, I need to do this more often because I think what it does I think when I do live streams, what it does is it allows people to talk right then and there instead of writing a comment and wait for me to see the comment and try to answer it in a comment. Because I know I've gotten some people, they'll ask a question, like they'll have an analog output question, and I'll see the comment, and I can't really, sometimes I try to explain in the comment, but then sometimes I don't understand exactly what they're asking. So a live stream allows me to figure out what they're really asking, and then I can try to explain it better right then and there. Also, I need to do these live streams because I can do Q&As. So people have questions like, I know a lot of people, like Warren Hewitt does all the time. He does Q&A sessions all the time. Or Mixed with the Masters. They do Q&A questions all the time. So I need to set up a way, and I probably need to set up my own website where people can input questions or whatever, and I can answer it through my website. I know they got Squarespace and Wix and all these other, the technology today is so much better and that's another video on how artists can actually, because everyone knows back in the day when an artist, the only way you have known Michael Jackson or Janet Jackson or any artist is the way they did it. They get, the Jacksons, they get popular, they get a record deal, then they can help their siblings, they get record deals, and then you get connected with producers in the business who get connected with engineers and studios who get connected with more producers who get connected with more musicians and it just goes on and on. And on top of that, with all the backing of the record label, allow them to tour and next they're making all their money because most artists made their money from the tours, not the record sales. But and next you got this mega artists like Janet, Michael, Madonna, and we know the deal. Start getting mega artists. So other than that, like I said, I didn't get a whole lot of questions. Let me see, you popped in. Sign a record deal today and they want your tours. Yeah, it's called 360 deals. Honestly, since we're talking about that for a few minutes, honestly, I don't know why anyone with the tools you got today would want a record deal. Yes, record deals with record labels, because record labels, with the big three, we're talking about Warner Brothers, Universal, and of course, Sony Music Group. And they have all the sub-labels on them, like Capitol Records, Epic Records, any record labels that, that people are initially signed to that record label, which falls under that particular group. But honestly, when your only source where you could be heard, honestly, your only source that you could be heard was through a record label that tried to get you on the radio. Then they try to get you on one of the main music videos like MTV or VH1 or BT. Other than that, that was it. No one heard of you unless they saw you on the radio, and you wouldn't get a lot of rotation being a new artist. And that's why the whole payola and all this whole thing came into play. But you wouldn't get a lot of until you started building momentum. But then some people would have skyrocketed because they got so light and it just done from radio station, and they start playing it and it becomes super, super popular because radio stations are about making money. This is why they're so keen about advertisement, and just the list goes on. I made a whole video on record labels. I made a video. If you haven't seen that, go back and watch the thing on record labels. But being that you have Twitch, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, satellite radio, iHeartRadio, Reverb Nation, SoundCloud, TuneCore, CD Baby, DistroKid. I mean, if I was an artist and I was, and on top of that, resources that you have where if you can somewhat learn to create these somewhat decent tracks of music with your studio, you come up with some really nice sounding tracks. There's no A&R and getting with the record label to see if they're going to release your stuff after everything that you did in your studio or did at the studio. You're not going to which is another video. We'll talk about how now, there's, with United Studios, which used to be Ocean Way and all that, closing their doors. But you didn't have to go to Westlake Recording Studio, get it recorded, get it engineered, get it mastered. Then you take back, you sit down with the A&R. The A&R is the one that came up with what's going to be released, along with the artists, with the producers, and present it to the label. And the label say, yeah or no, we're not going to release that album. Or there's contract issues or production issues, or there's conflict with the label. Now they're not going to release you. Plus, they still own the masters. because you signed a contract. So now they own the master. So I mean, you don't own any music that you do. They own it. You know, they get to choose it released. And now, I mean, you got a person with some talent. They can go buy. They don't have to go nowhere near the gear I got up here. You know, they can go buy an interface. You know, maybe when it's like these NPCs one here, you can go buy your controller, some software. If you're somewhat decent, or you can collaborate with some of the people that come up with this amazing music. Once you get it done and you learn how to mix it, record it, mix it, get it mastered, or learn how you master where to sound like a polished record. Now it's just a matter of starting SoundCloud, like getting a premium edition of SoundCloud or Reverb Nation or whatever, getting your stuff uploaded there. You don't have to have a whole lot to get into iTunes or Apple Music or Google Play, and on top of that, you can even use a distributor like DistroKid or 1RPM and so forth, and pay them and they'll get that stuff on a lot of platforms because they're distribution. On top of that, create a YouTube presence where you start building what's the word? You start building followers. You know, before you had 50 followers. Now it's 100 followers. Now it's 1,000 followers. Now it's 5,000 followers. Now it's 50,000 followers. 100,000 followers. Yeah, you may not still be able to get into the big venues like Radio City Hall in New York, but you can still do the smaller ones to get the ones that follow you. You know, these are people that you may have 100 followers in South Carolina, 1,000 followers in New York, 50 followers in North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, or 100 followers in Tallahassee, Florida, or 75 followers in Birmingham, Alabama. You know, and you go do these shows. And, you know, you might agree to even if it's clubs, you know, and the clubs say, well, I got 100,000 followers on YouTube. And the club owner might even have heard of you. And they say, okay, this club can sit 500 people. And you can advertise on YouTube and your own webpage. I'm going to be performing at the Ritz in Houston. You know, downtown Houston, the Ritz or whatever the name of the place is. So if you're in Houston, it's, you know, tickets are, you know, $10 to go to the club and pay $10. They'll get to see you perform. And, you know, okay, the money that you make, you can take some of that money, you can save some of that money to travel to the next place, and you keep doing that to start touring as you build your following. There's just on top of that, your music's on. People, they can download your music and buy it from Apple Music or whatever. You know, they can buy it from iTunes or Google Play, or they can buy the music. And, you know, before you know it, at least 100,000 people, let's say 50,000 people have bought at least one track, 99-cent track. That's $50,000 you made. And it just grows. There's so many ways there's just no gatekeepers the way it used to be before, where if you get in trouble with your record label, now they're shutting your career down, they want to blackball you. As an independent artist, you can't be blackballed because you don't belong to anyone, right? So let me read some more. I say ignorance, man. Kids just don't know what they don't know. Yeah, and it's true. It's just true. You don't know what you don't know. So you don't know what to do. What is that you don't know what to do, right? It said, believe it or not, independent artists are making money selling physical. Vinyl is a nice boutique industry right now. And I'm like this, because people think your mega artists made most of their money from the record label, but your mega artists made most of their money, got where they are. Right? Even Michael Jackson didn't make money from Epic Records. He made money from touring. But Michael Jackson got so big because of the popularity of stuff that was playing on the radio that he made the record labels made millions of dollars because he sold 50 million copies of Thriller by itself. That's not including the Bad album, Off the Wall album, all, but just Thriller alone, 50 million copies. But it made the record label, I don't know, $500 million, if not more. But Michael Jackson, because he got so big worldwide, he was making billions of dollars because he would tour Japan, tour Europe, all over the United States, and he would constantly tour. And because his concert tours become 50 to 100,000 people, 50 to 100,000 people, 400, doing 200-300 shows, Michael Jackson probably would rack in a year at least $25 to $30 million just from touring in 1 year. You do that over multiple years, that's how he made $500 million. He made it from touring. So this is what make it artist. Same thing with Prince. Prince didn't make a lot of money from Warner Brothers. He made money from touring. Stevie Wonder makes his money from touring. Whitney Houston made her money from touring. Mariah Carey makes her money from touring. This is why you turn around and you see Brian McKnight or why they tour. That's where their money's at for the artists. Because artists didn't own the record labels. They did not, record labels, they all of them got the shady deal record contract. Record labels say we're going to own 80% of the record sales. We're only going to give you 3 points or 4 points. Now, you understand what points are. That point is, let's say, what's the average point? 8.1 or 9.1 cents off the dollar, 9.1. So if you get 3 points, you do 9.1. That's 27.3 cents of percentage of the sales. So 27 cents. So if a CD sold for $12.99, well, the artist only got 27.3 cents of that $12.99. This is per unit. So you do the math. 500,000 units was certified gold. You do the math. Think how much the artist got, and that's before the artists have to settle all their advances, touring support, and everything else with the label. They didn't make any money. They had to settle with the record label before they can make money. This is why most artists were broke. Beyonce, when she was with Destiny's Child, didn't make the kind of money she made until a few Destiny Child albums later. Now Beyonce's where she's at now, but she wasn't like that in 1997. She was nowhere near like that in 1997. And this is a lot of artists. Brian McKnight was nowhere near like it was when he started in 1988. Is This the Way Love Goes? If anyone remembers that album. Brian McKnight didn't have nowhere near the kind of money. And even right now, TLC and Tony Braxton was, going bankrupt because of Arista Records and those type of crooked, those I have cited record deals. I got some more comments that popped in. I didn't get a chance to read them all. It said independent artists sell less volume, but rake in more cash because there's no middleman. I got out of the last record deal in 2011 and been independent ever since. And that's 100% fact. It's better if you sold 150,000 units and you made $1 million. It's better to have made $1 million selling 150,000 units than it is to have sold Diamond 10 million copies. It only get $1 million of it when the record label just got finished making 100 million of it, and you only got 1 million of it, and you got $2 or $3 million in debt. Because what does most artists do? Once you become an established artist, you can't live in the same neighborhood because you won't get any peace from the neighbors. The paparazzi is going to be all. If you live in a triple-digit neighborhood, they're going to be all in your windows with cameras. You can't get no privacy. You're going to catch some sort of assault case because someone's trying to break in your house, trying to get pictures of you butt naked in tubs so they can sell it to what's those networks or Inquirer, Star Magazine, just how ridiculous they are. On top of that, you're going to live in a more pricier home, which means your property tax is more and more expensive. You're going to pay a higher property tax because the more expensive the house is, the more the property tax is. And the higher the mortgage is, the higher the utilities are. And, they get, so forth. So the cost of living goes up, but it's almost like what we're seeing right now with what's going on with what we're seeing now with inflation. Everything's going up, but people's wages aren't. So people can't really eat like they want to. They can't, it's crazy. So it's better to make $1 million just being independent than to make $1 million because that's all you're getting out of the 100 million. That's not a good deal because now you can feel cheated, and they will cheat you big time. It said, yeah, I want to out some music independently over the next years. Record label deals seem terrible, especially with the rumors that these artists are sleeping their way to the top. Let me tell you, y'all probably hear about. There's a dark side. You've heard. I don't know if you heard Christopher Williams' story, or or this whole gay rumor with P Diddy's coming out. But let me tell you, and you used to hear it a lot about how some of these rappers were putting in these unwanted filmed situations where they can, it's kind of like, you got to remember, money, there's always some controlling factor behind money. If you're making people money, and we'll go, even go back to Tupac, with the whole Anderson deal and Tupac, and and the whole fight at the MGM Grand Theater and in Vegas and the whole. But really look at Tupac, look at Biggie Smalls, and all these situations where artists, and think about what people are talking about with Jamie Foxx right now. It's too deep to really go into this video, because I really don't want to go so deep with this, because this thing can go super deep on the dark side. So, but yeah, let me tell you, the music industry is, I put it like this: Dave Chappelle said it best about some of the dark stuff that you would not believe that happens in entertainment in Hollywood. And the music industry, all that's connected. Really, even sports, because it's still, even though it's sports, it's still entertainment to watch your favorite athletes. It's still entertainment. This is why athletes can even be connected to the music in the entertainment world. Let me see. So, okay. Yeah, I start off a session player contracted, to Vivid, right? Then RCA, then Sony. The last thing I want to allow is a friend to get a record deal. Yeah, record deals people are waking up. Thank God to the internet. People are waking up. Most of the top names, including Michael Jackson, also made most of their fortune from investing in record publishing. Well, yeah, that's another video too. I need to talk about publishing, because if you don't write your stuff and you don't have publishing, you're going to be broke, because publishing is your number one tool. Because you make a hit, they're going to want to not only connect it to a medium format like a CD, they're going to want to probably put it in movies where you need sync rights. You got to learn your publishing rights. They're going to want to connect it to maybe a commercial, put it in a game. So many avenues where your music can be used, and if you're getting all these rights, you can make money off of that one song. And it happens. They do it for NBA games and videos and commercials. A really popular tune. Think about that. Think how much money 50 Cent and other people that have the rights to, like, for example, In the Club. Doom, 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 doom. I mean, they play that advanced. A lot of people don't know that when you play music at NBA games, and because NBA games or NFL games or baseball games, that stuff is also put on TV. So once it's put on TV, you have to have rights for that stuff to be heard. This is the whole purpose of why you want to be associated with a not only a performance rights organization, but a mechanical rights organization. You want to be associated with both. This is where it's so important to be registered with Nielsen SoundScan and so forth, and all these different. There's so much to it that you want to know if you want to protect yourself. I said, dude, if you ever want an interview, I can tell you the super dark side of the business. I've seen it all. One day what I'm gonna do next is what I'm gonna do instead of doing a live stream on YouTube. What I'm gonna set up a Zoom session where we can all talk to each other instead of just writing the comments. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do a Zoom session, and that way we can all chime in, and that way we can all just and I'll just let people feed, because that would be. So I'm gonna start doing that as well. He said, I think AI, Michael Perez said AI is going to replace musicians. No, not as long. Musicians, real musicians like ourselves, will never let that happen. But what AI would do is AI will compete with real musicians. That's what's going to happen. AI is going to compete. But as long as people want to play an instrument, you're not going to be able to replace them. Especially as long as their artists are going to want to use real musicians to go and travel and do shows. I just don't, because the way we humanly critically think and react on AI, just if it ain't programmed in AI, they're not going to know how to respond to a crowd. I just don't, prove me wrong, but I don't see that happening. Well, you could always, yes. Vigilante said that people say these songs don't have soul because they are AI written and AI generated. What AI is also starting to do is they're starting to regenerate music from the past that was the feel of it to get the same feel, but you and I know that's really sampling. Really, that's what it's doing. So other than that, there's a legitimate reason every sound is the same for about 2 years. Changes little. There are sounds that sound like it's so many factors to that as well. But Vigilante said drum machines never replace drummers. And if you look at it, here's the funny, crazy thing about drum machines versus drummers. It's really more genre based and music that is more of a factor. Like, for example, if I come up here and use this MPC and I'll load up a bunch of drum samples and I just create beats, which it's been happening for the last 20, 30 years, right? You've been creating drum beats, samples, even Michael Jackson drums or drum beats, even in the 80s. They were doing this for 40 plus years, right? But the drum sample, drum beat was more heavily dominated in R&B, hip hop, certain dubstep, trap music, techno, electronic, EDM music is more dominant in those genres. Most of the time it would not fly for rock music, country music, jazz. Anything that was always going to be pretty much dominantly musician heavy, where it had to be live musicians, because they even record live that way with real musicians for those genres. Jazz, rock, country are always mostly going to be heavily dominated with real musicians, including a real drummer. It isn't necessarily needed. Now, it was more dominant to have a combination of the both in R&B music in the 80s, especially when R&B music had bands like Midnight Star, Starpoint. They were more heavily dominated because the R&B still had bands. One of the last few bands that was still trying to do anything was like Earth, Wind & Fire, and then, of course, Mint Condition. But most of the R&B music had went to producers like Teddy Riley and so forth that would sequence drums, that the drums, as far as a real drummer using a real drum kick, wasn't necessary. But now you look at it, even to this day, with a lot of hip hop and a lot of electronic EDM music, when the last time you actually had a real drum? That's coming from somebody's MPC or drum program off of Studio One or whatever, or in Reason or Ableton Live. That's what you're hearing now. But if you go back and listen to a lot of country music, quite a bit of rock music, you're still going to hear somebody playing a Ludwig set with a Black Beauty snare. It's genre based more than anything else. So man, if your studio can record drums effectively with a large area of sounds, you will have business. All my tracking rooms, especially in drums, if you can record drums, you can record anything. And that's just true. And this is the reason why I have a drum set in my other room, but the ceiling's low. It would be more ideal because my ceiling is high in my living room to record in there, because I can put a room mic in there, and I can actually get more of an ambient, natural room ambience. I've done this in the video on why. If you go back in the video, I made a video on it said how do commercial studios get the sound they get, and most of the time, if you look at it, I got my hallway has it's 24-foot ceiling, so that the space, if I record a trumpet or sax in there, the sound bouncing in the room going to mic increase this ambience just like you would in a recording studio. The only difference is I don't have this huge live room like a commercial setup. That's the only thing. But in drum rooms, I mean, people ought to know by now, the sounds of the rooms is part of the sound of what made stuff sound big in recordings. I hope people knew that. People didn't know that. Now you know. And with the size of the live room, the mic placement, as well as the choice of preamps and mics, is the reason why Nirvana or Guns N' Roses or Van Halen or any rock band or even jazz bands or even philharmonic orchestras sound the way they sound. If you listen to those big, and there is a video. You can go back there. I think you can too, but you just put, Air Studios in London, right? If you go to YouTube and just search Air Studios in London, one of their videos, you'll see they're recording an orchestra. And if you you have to listen on at least computer monitor speakers to hear. You can't listen to you can't listen on your phone. You can't listen to a set of earbuds. You need to listen to some speakers that creates real reflections in your ear. And you'll hear the dynamics of that orchestra going through that Neve console. That's a Neve VR88 console. And they're using FET tube microphones. They're using FETs and tube microphones, U67s, U47s. They're using ribbon mics. They're using and just a whole array of microphones. And those are going through Neve preamps, a lot of other different types of preamps. And it's going through that console. And when you listen to that orchestra playing, you can hear the dynamics of it. But one of the biggest things, because they're in an old church that has this cathedral ambient sound that makes it sound. And when that's captured in the video, when they get that and they sync it to a movie, this is the reason why it sounds like it does. And one of the things that, if you ever want a major set with acoustics, go to a movie theater before they even start the film, and just sit in the room and just listen to, and really be quiet. Of course, there are always going to be people talking, but just kind of observe this weird effect that the way the room sounds without no sound in it. And then when the movie starts and how it has this, it's almost like what they're always talking about, the Atmos mixing thing with the surround, this big, all this. It's because the acoustics of that room. Pay attention to the acoustics of that room. But let me see. I got a couple more questions. Then I gotta wrap because I'm starving. I gotta go get something to eat. I'm glad everyone tuned in because it's going on an hour and 20 minutes. I'll see. Here's one last question. You can still get huge drum sounds in your house with low ceilings, but you need to set up room mic in a room that's not in the room the drums are in. Drums in the bedroom, room in the hallway. Yeah, it's true. And here's another trick that Acoustica Audio plugin, as well as IK Multimedia with their plugins that actually come up with plugins that gives the effect that these drums are being recorded in these different types of rooms. I'll show people how I'm getting this drum sounds with those plugins in another video. But and there, believe it or not, sometimes there are drummers that want a low ceiling room because they don't want a big room sound, but they're gonna add they're gonna run it through some sort of processors to get the illusion. Some engineers do that. They'll mix it on other, mix it with the drums. They'll mix, on other, and so forth. They'll do that. But the ideal is also there's so many ways you can mic that, the drums. And that's if you're, and this is the people that are using real drums want to get real drum sound. Like I said, there are people like me that use tons of drum kits from keyboards and programs that I've used a lot of. And like I said, the biggest thing is what you're trying to go for and what the audience will perceive. Because the audience doesn't know, I'm talking about people that are not into recording. They know absolutely nothing about UA 1176s or Royer 121 microphones or Telefunken 251, Elan 251 microphones, or running a set of I'm running through a AMEC 9098 console. They don't know. They don't care, all they care is the music they're listening to. And that's not to downplay good recording ideas from recording in someone's home, because it's always great to learn techniques that make your stuff sound professional. That's the idea we all want, is to get, how do we make our stuff sound like a commercial studio does in our homes? So that's a good idea. What man put out about network that he put out about recording in a low room, but recording your drums in the mic. And once again, it's about the mic and the preamps when you do that as well. So other than that, like I said, I really appreciate everyone tuning in. It's been going on an hour and 22 minutes. You can see these things can grow real fast. As far as when I do these live and people start tuning in, I really appreciate everyone tuned in and watching the video. But I'm famished. I gotta get something to eat before I fall out. But I really do. Everyone appreciate everyone tuning in. Michael said, glad to have you back on the live. I appreciate it. Like I said, I gotta work out the schedule because my schedule is all over the place, but that's not gonna be for long. I'm only gonna work this job probably for the next few months, and I gotta go back to, So he said, go eat. Have a great night, and I enjoyed the live stream. I appreciate it, man. Networks for tuning in. Thanks, Vigilante. Thanks to Michael and everyone else that watched. I'm going to cut it short. I ain't going to short. It's been long. But anyhow, I got to go get something to eat. Once again, I thank everyone for tuning in, and I'll let everyone know when I'm going to do this again. Because like I said, I know people wonder where I've been. But I'll keep this going. I think this works more than anything else I've been doing. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'm glad everyone enjoyed. We'll see you next time.